continue. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So much fun having you here. I'm excited to have you here. We are going to learn some tips and tricks for a really fun pattern today. I see a lot of familiar faces. Hi, Myrtle. I'm going to definitely need all of your group participation today as we go through this pattern, because my goal today is to answer some questions you might have about the pattern and to give you tips and tricks about the pattern. Mainly, I'm going to go over how to read a chart for this pattern to help you help you understand how this works. So I'm not actually crocheting today. We are looking at a pattern, going over tips and tricks, and I want to answer your questions. So I definitely need a lot of participation from y'all. Cool. Oh, so many people. Hello, hello. If you guys want to go ahead and open up the chat, you can let us know you're here, where you're here from. I'm gonna hand it over to Lillian from Yarn Inspiration so she can do the introduction, and then we will jump in to the not macrame crochet blanket.
Thanks, Molly. Hey everyone, welcome back to another live community classroom with Michaels. Today we have Molly from the Molly Bird with us ready for another exciting class. Today we'll be crocheting the Not Macrame crochet blanket. My name is Lillian from Yarn Inspirations, and I'll be helping with any questions you might have during today's class. Feel free to ask questions here in the chat and we'll be sure that Molly answers them. While we're giving you some time to join today's class, feel free to let us know where you're watching from, as Molly said. And just a reminder that today's class is being recorded and you can find the recording at michaels.com/classes. Back to you.
Perfect. I don't know where we landed on having the pattern in the chat. Are you going to add that, Lillian?
I sure am doing it now.
Okay. Perfect. So if you guys don't already have the pattern, she's going to add it to the chat so you can grab it so that way you can follow along with me today. Or if you just want to sit back, relax, chill out and listen as I'm going through the stuff and then asking questions and then go back and watch the replay, you absolutely could do that as well, whatever works. So welcome everybody. This is going to be a different type of Michael's class for me today because I'm not actually crocheting. I'm going to essentially walk you through how to read this pattern. Specifically, I'm going to talk a lot about reading the chart and helping you understand the words with the chart and then showing you the example itself so we can hopefully understand it all. I'm also here to answer some of your questions. So if you've looked at the pattern itself and you have a question, why don't you kind of jot it down for yourself so that way I can make sure I get to it if I don't happen to just answer it on my own. I hope that this all works for all of you. Are we cool with that? Thumbs up? Yeah? Sweet. Awesome. So today we are talking about the Not Macrame crochet blanket. Super unique. How many of you saw this blanket and you're like, whoa, what is that? Like it is super unique. It's one of those that you see it and it's almost overwhelming because you're like, that looks so confusing. How did they do that? But honestly, when we break it down and you see the simple stitches that are being used and how they're being used, you can make this blanket in no time. If you are a crocheter who is at least past the beginner stage where you're introduced to different stitches, you can absolutely do this. And I have the actual sample here. I have it all folded up, but maybe I can hold it up here. Are you guys able to see that at all? Maybe I could turn it around. Can you see that? It's so pretty. It's such a pretty blanket. And it's just unique. It's made out of Bernat blanket yarn, so it's a really plush. I know a lot of you have used this yarn before. It's so you can see here, look, it's it's hefty. It's got some heft to it. And I think that the macrame section, which is essentially just crocheted lace, adds a really beautiful texture to a bed of single crochets. That's really all it is. We're doing sections of macrame in a bed of single crochets. So we can absolutely accomplish this together. Before I jump in and take a look at the pattern, I'm going to do a share screen with all of you with it. Are there any questions here to start off before I jump in? I'm just curious. Everybody have the pattern? Everybody's good? I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any questions. I think you guys are just ready to go. All right, I'm going to go. Lillian, jump in. If I am talking and you see a question pop up, let me know, all right?
Sure thing, no worries.
All right, cool. So I'm going to do a share screen, everybody, and I have popped up the pattern itself directly from Yarnspirations on my screen. I think you guys can all see it right now. This is obviously the front page of the pattern, and that's the beautiful image of the blanket. And you can see there, they look like squares. They look like diamonds, right? Diamonds of some really beautiful lace crochet. And it resembles like these little sections here that look like they are popping up off of the fabric. They almost look like a bobble. I'm going to tell you, they're not a bobble. It's a treble crochet that's just kind of popping out of the fabric. And it's such a unique way to use the height of a stitch to our advantage by putting that treble next to singles to make it squish up like that, to give that really beautiful texture. And this is total spoiler alert. Those same stitches are used sort of in the middle of those sort of mini diamonds inside the larger diamond. Okay. Beyond that, these are all single crochets. These are, it's a bed of single crochets. And then in here, it's some single crochets, it's chains, it's the treble crochet. So there's not a whole lot of stitches you have to know. Like if you know these stitches, it's just a matter of putting them together and figuring it all out. But I will tell you, like if you pick up this pattern, you look at, and it's a lot of words, you guys. I mean, I look at this even as a professional crocheter. My first thought is, oh man, I would have hate to write that pattern out, you know? The second thought is, I'm going to get lost. The minute I start reading a row, like if I'm reading like this row right here, I'm going to get lost immediately and be like, where am I at now? Where am I at now? And that's a struggle for me. How many of you have had that problem before where you're following along with the pattern and you're like, you read a sentence, you know, and you're like, okay, so you do that. Then you go back, and not only do you have to find the row that you're on, you have to find what part of the sentence you're on and make sure, okay, so I ended with that. So I'm going to, okay. And it takes so long to get through a row just because it's all in words. That was the catalyst for me to want to learn how to read charts, because with charts, it's such a visual representation of what the actual stitches are and what your fabric is, what you're making, that it helped me understand what I'm doing. So it's no longer reading, okay, chain one single crochet in each of the first 7, 1 treble, and the next single crochet, 1 single crochet, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I look at it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to put a treble here. I'm going to put a single here. I'm going to put chains here. Like it's like this quick motion here. And it just really helped me out. So because this pattern does have all of these written instructions with it, and knowing that you guys can read written instructions, right? You guys can look through these instructions and you could get through them. I felt like the most impact I could give to you as far as the biggest tip is really how to use the chart, because this is a great opportunity for you to start using a chart like this, because you have those written instructions to fall back on and to check yourself on. You could always say, okay, so the written instructions say to do blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you find that on the chart and then you say, okay, oh, I see exactly what they're saying here. And it's a great way for you to double check yourself and become more familiar with charts and have them be more incorporated into what your natural crochet flow is. My experience is that a lot of crocheters and knitters are so visual. You're all visual learners. That's for the most part why you're here learning on the Michael's free class, so that way you can learn how to do this. That's why so many people subscribe to those of us that are teaching on YouTube. It's because you need to see how those stitches are worked. So charts allow you to do that. It allows you to see how stitches are worked, but they're represented by a symbol. And the symbols are so easy to understand once I give you my tips on how to understand them, okay? So here's my plan. I want you guys to jump in and chat with me, ask me questions, do all this as I'm going along. I want to go through how to read these symbols. I'm going to tell you my key tips to know what each symbol means. And then we're going to jump in and we're going to read through this chart together. And at the same time, I will go over to my hands and I will show you on the actual sample, like what that section is that we just finished. So that way you can kind of see not only the visual of the chart, but the visual of the sample. And then I'm here to answer your questions. If you're like, wait a minute, I don't understand that. Can you repeat that or whatever that may be? Does that sound good, everybody? Yes, yes. Awesome. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Myrtle. Thank you, Doris. Okay. So all of you, if you have your pattern with you, I am going to be down here at the chart. First things first, I do want to mention that this pattern, if you start off with the words, it says to chain 104. And then essentially the first 10 rows are single crochets, right? You obviously there's more details written there that you would chain one single crochet in the second chain from hook and blah, 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 blah. But it's essentially the first 10 rows are single crochets. And then you jump into the chart. It even tells you refer to the diagram. Here's the first row. So that's where if you were following along with the words as I'm looking at the chart, that's where you would start, where it says first row. Okay. All right. Everybody good? I think we're good. Sounds good. Awesome. I'm going to be asking for a lot of feedback today. I'm really not that needy. It's just I want to make sure I'm giving you what you need. Okay, so as we're looking at a chart like this, if you have never looked at a chart before, if it has been something that is super scary to you, you're like, that's just a whole lot happening that I just don't understand. We're gonna demystify this for you. It's gonna be like the matrix coming clear for you. And by the end of this class, you're gonna be like, where are the patterns with the charts? Because it's so awesome. Okay. Let's start off with the stitch key because that is key. When you create a chain stitch, it essentially looks like an oval, right? When you create it, it looks like an oval. Well, the symbol for a chain stitch is essentially it's an oval. All right, well, that's easy. So if even just knowing that, we can see down here, oh, look at all those chain stitches that are worked between all of those X's or those crosses that we don't know what are yet. There's a lot of chains. Oh, I don't know about you guys, but instantly my mind goes, ooh, this is going to go fast, right? Because chains are so much faster than other stitches. I'm like, oh, girl, yes, I'm ready for that. Like, that's where my brain goes. So I can automatically see there's a lot of chains. The next one, the single crochet. We all know that the single crochet is sort of this short squatty stitch that's basically a square. It's usually the gauge of a single crochet is the same number of stitches as the same number of rows. Okay, that's pretty basic. So just as it's a basic little stitch, a squatty little stitch, so is this little cross. That little cross is a single crochet. All right. So now you look over here, you're like, oh man, I thought this was going to be fast. Look at all those single crochets, right? So now you're like, oh man, it tried to dupe me. And so right now we understand probably 95% of this pattern. Okay. Like just knowing those two symbols, we understand 95% of this pattern. We also can see that we have all of these crosses and they're all like, see how they all like stack one on top of the other? That lets us know that we're essentially going to be single crocheting one on top, one row on the next row, on the next row, one on top of the other, right? We don't ever have to wonder if we're putting a single crochet between the single crochets into some chain space. The chart itself tells us exactly where the chains are going to go, where the single crochets are going to go. For example, right here where we have a single crochet stitch, and it's right on top of this chain 5. Okay. So the one question you might have is, okay, well, does that mean I put that single crochet into that third chain or do I put it into the space? Well, if you ask me, I would say that you have to make a crochet educated decision. If you want to fight with the piece and put it into the actual chain, I think you can go ahead and do that. If you want it to be easy to use and put it into that big old space that's created, I think you should do that. So that's what I would do. So can you see so far how it's like, okay, I see what these symbols are. They represent actual stitches. And I don't have to wonder where I have to put stitches because one stitch from one row is directly on top of wherever it's supposed to go on the row below. Like it gives you a direct indication where it's supposed to go. Where if this was a pattern that say it was like a cross pattern or a cable pattern or something, where you would get to a point where it said skip 3 stitches, double crochet in the next stitch, and then do a double crochet in the 2 stitches behind the stitch you just created, but 2 stitches back. Like that's a lot of words to read. Whereas if you were just looking at a chart, you could be like, oh, that one goes there and that one goes there. Does that make sense? I mean, it's so much easier. All right, so we talked about the squatty little single crochet. Now we have the double crochet, and this is where it gets interesting, and this is where it gets fun, because all of a sudden your world of the stitches that you can read on a chart are going to open up like crazy. Are you ready? So the double crochet, it's a tall stitch. Wow, that's represented by, it looks like a big T, right? It's no longer like this little cross. It's like we moved that the top hat that was on the center of this cross. Now it's on a top hat here. It's the top of this T. Okay. All right. So I think of the T with the top hat. And then it has one slash. I want you to think of that slash as that's the yarn over you put on your hook before you go into the stitch. I'm going to say that again. When you do a double crochet, how do you do it? You have a loop on your hook, and then you yarn over your hook and you go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, so you get 3 loops on hook, right? That first yarn over you do before you go into the stitch, that's represented right there by that slash mark. Okay. So if we know that that slash mark represents 1 yarn over, which we know we call a double crochet, in the UK, I think they call that a treble, but don't quote me on that. But it's not the same word; it's the same symbol, and we can translate that into American crochet, and we create our double crochet. But they don't call it a double, but they use the same symbol, and it's the same stitch. Okay, do you see what I'm saying here? So we can see this, it has 1 yarn over. If we look down here, without even knowing what this is called over here, how many yarn overs do we do on that stitch to create it? 2 big old yarn overs before we go into the stitch. Well, that's great. We know how to work those off. I mean, once you put those yarn overs on, you go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. However many loops you have on your hook depends on how many yarn overs you started with. And then you just methodically yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2, right? So if this stitch, say it had 5 slash marks, you would put 5 yarn overs on your hook, and then you would methodically work them off the hook. Like, see what I mean about your stitches? You just opened up this world of stitches. You could go grab yourself a Japanese stitch dictionary now and be like, oh, I know what that stitch is. I have no idea what they're calling it, but I know how to do that stitch, right? That's the beauty of using these symbols, is that the entire world of crochet just opened up to you, because they are what's the word I'm looking for? They're consistent. They are
a universal language.
Universal language. Thank you. I'm like, what's the word?
Mm-hmm.
So they help you so much. So anybody from around the world who understands how to do charts can pick up this English written pattern, can see all these words and be like, They just pop down here and they're like, okay, so here's what I'm supposed to do. Now they might have to do a little bit of research of how many stitches to start with. And just by looking at the piece, they could probably see that they're going to start with some rows of single crochet. They might not know how many, but for the most part, they can create an entire pattern just from this. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? No? All right. So here's the funny thing, you guys. I only have Myrtle and Susan on my view, so I'm like totally relying on you guys. I'm like, any questions, Myrtle, Susan? It's kind of funny to me.
We do have one question from Cappy, but you can cover it when suits. We were just wondering if you could go over the notes right at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Let me do that in just a sec. I'll go back and do that. I absolutely will. Okay, so we know what these symbols mean now. So we have a chain, we have a single, we have a double, and a treble. How many of you know how to create these stitches just on their own? Raise of hands. We know how to create these. There's nothing new, nothing crazy here. We're not reinventing the wheel. We know how to do these stitches. Now it's a matter of understanding where these stitches go. So we can either read all those words and get lost in the instructions, or we can look down here and see what's happening. So right here on row 1, somebody just rang my doorbell. I'm going to give you guys a heads up. I'm going to try and make it so my dog doesn't bark, but I'm hoping she doesn't. Okay, so we can see right here on row 1, we come across, and reading the chart, this particular chart tells you it's a 25 stitch repeat, and it blocks off a section of 25 stitches. Okay, Penny, no, come here. I'm so sorry. Sit down. I apologize, you guys. Okay, gotta love live. I'm sorry. Okay, so we have these lives, or we have these single crochets, and we're going to work them across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches. Now, one thing I wish this chart had were numbers for the stitches down here. Okay, so that would be my first thing I would do, is I would probably go in and write the numbers like I'd go all the way across. I'd just write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way across, just for my own sanity, just so that I knew. And so you can count those off. You'd work across that many stitches. And then we have our first symbol here. So we have a treble crochet. It's kind of hard to see. It's kind of hard to see that there's 2 slashes there. So one thing you could do is you could take a highlighter or a colored pencil, and you could highlight the treble crochet. And Penny, please stop it. Come here. It's okay. Go lay down. Go lay down. So we could highlight that treble crochet. And what that does is it helps you see that stitch easier, because your brain actually identifies colors better than it understands symbols. So you could quickly say, okay, I'm going to color this in pink. And then whenever you see another treble on the chart, color it in pink, sort of like a paint by number, right? Then as you're reading the chart, whenever you see that pink stitch, your brain will automatically be like, oh, okay, that's a treble crochet. That's what I need to do there. Does that make sense? So that's one thing that I would do. That's a big tip. And that's something that I do a lot when I'm working with charts, because again, like my eyes can get lost, and the symbols, when they look small like this, you can accidentally think that it's one thing and it's another. But if you do sort of like pre-planning of the chart, where, you know, if we're going to write the numbers down or we're going to color in the symbols, that helps us out the most. So that's our treble. We know we're going to put the treble right there into that single crochet. Then we couple it up with another single crochet. And then right here, we can see we have 5 chains. And at the same time, we're going to skip 2 single crochets. Everybody with me on that? So we have 5 chains, we're skipping 2 singles, and we put a single into the next one. And then we do another treble. And then we have all of these stitches to work across until we start our next diamond, essentially. Here's a tip. Again, this is what I do. When I'm faced with a chart that has this, where there's a lot of singles like all in a row, where it's more than what my brain can just automatically look at and be like, okay, that's 5 stitches. I will usually count them before I start the pattern and just write the number down, like, oh, okay, I have to do 20 single crochets, or I have to do 18 single crochets, and I'll just put it on the chart itself. It just helps me when I jump into the actual patterns. That way I can be like, oh, okay, now I just finished this part and I got to crochet across. And it's usually just on the first row, because then when I get to the second row, I can quickly see, okay, I'm going to, like, second row, I'd start reading back this way, right? So I'll put a single on top of that treble. I'll chain 3. This is where I have to decide if I'm going to put that single in the stitch or in the space. I usually go in the space. And then I have 3 chains, a single into the treble. And then I can, instead of knowing what this count is, I know I'm going to single crochet over to the treble crochet. So I no longer have to count. You see what I'm saying here? So this is where, for me, I can look at this and real quickly, I just saved so much time in my life, because I no longer have to look at the pattern and be like, okay, where do I go next? Like, I can immediately see on the chart, all right, so now I'm done with that. I have to come over here to the next treble. When I get to the next treble, I'm starting this all up again. Does that all make sense so far? Yep. Perfect. Thank you, Myrtle. Thank you, Susan. All right. So if you didn't catch this already, you're reading the chart from right to left and then from left to right. One thing that the chart does for you is it puts the numbers on the side that you're going to read them on. So meaning on row 1, your number is over here, and that lets you know you're going to start reading your chart from over here, from right to left. And then over here, you're going to start reading your chart over here from left to right. You see what I mean? The other thing that the pattern designer did here is she made the chart so that it has different colors for each row, which is super convenient. And it's one of those things, if you come across a chart that does not have that and it's hard to see what chains go with what row or whatever it may be for you, you could always go in and, again, highlight your wrong side rows or highlight your right side rows or whatever works for you. at the end of the day, guys, make the patterns work for you. We already do that with our written patterns, right? You might go in and put a note in there in your written pattern so to help you better understand what the pattern is saying, right? Put it in your own language. You could do that with charts also by using these little tricks. Like I use a lot of color in mine because color really helps me see things better. I'll even go in and I'll sometimes highlight an area where I know it's the repeat so that I know this is the section I'm going to repeat across my row. So for like this blanket, it's 4 repeats across. So you will, if the math is correct, you should be repeating this whole chart, I think twice is what I didn't count all these stitches. Somebody can count it and check me. But these are obviously 2 of the diamonds. But if you want 4 diamonds, I'm thinking it's this whole chart twice. But you would just continue on through the chart. It's essentially just like if the pattern were saying repeat from star to the end of the pattern. It's the same thing. You'd go back to where the pattern started, the repeat, and then continue on from there. And this repeat on this particular chart is unique because see how it's highlighted? Like it's the gray and then it's the blue and then it's the gray and then it's the blue. That's your repeat. And if I am right, in your written instructions, you'll see that that's where the repeat is showing you where it says, does it say repeat from star? Yeah, that's where your star starts, is where that's highlighted. So that's even better for you to be able to go back to the written instructions and check your chart reading skills. Questions so far? No?
Yeah, we have a few.
Okay.
Doreen is wondering, do you turn the blanket at the end of the row?
Yes. So, and that's why you would read the chart that way, because think about this. As you're working down row 1, this is the last stitch you created. So you turn your work and you're working back. So what's the first stitch you're going to work on? You're going to first start working on this one with that stitch. So that's why you'll start reading the chart back this way. See, it's a very logical explanation, right? That's why you'd read it back this way. If you were making something in the round, you would always start your rows on this side, on the right side, reading right to left, because every round would start off over here with stitch number 1, right? But when you're reading a chart where you're flipping back and forth, that's why you have to start reading the chart from the opposite end, because the first stitch you're going to work into is that last one you created. So you'll come back here and then this is the last one you did. So that's the first one you're going to do. And then you go back here, so on and so forth. Good.
Yeah. We have another question here just about how the chains are drawn. So I'll just read the question in full. My question is, on the diagram, you said that we put the single where we see the chain, but the diagram looks like the chain is a chain with no single. How do we know on the chart where we add a single and when we do not?
Okay, read it to me one more time.
My question is, on the diagram, you said that we put the single where we see the chain, but the diagram looks like the chain is a chain with no single. How do we know on the chart where we add a single and when we do not? The chains appear to be jumping rows.
All right, so my guess is, all right, so let's pick on row 6 for a minute. So I'm on row 6. If I'm reading across, I can see it. So I'm putting a single right there into the top of that treble. And I can see that row 6, the color of the stitches are blue. So I know that I'm going to be paying attention to all the blue stitches here between the black above and the black below. Okay, so I'm looking at the blue stitches. So I can see here, if I'm just kind of following along, like if I were to draw a line through all these stitches, I should be able to just draw a line through everything. So I see a single, I see chain 3, and then I see a single. And I can see here, this single is going into, I would put it in that chain 3 space is where I would put it, y'all. I don't fight putting stitches into chains. It's very rare. So I would put it into that space, and then you could put the single into that single. And then you come to the next blue stitch, single into that chain 3 space. And then the next blue stitch, it has these 3 chains before we get over here to this single. And so this here, you could read this as we put a single into the chain 3 space, chain 3, skip a single crochet in the next single crochet, right? That's a lot to say versus just put a single crochet there, chain 3, put a single crochet there. Does that answer her question? Please reply back to me and let me know. I mean, I think the best way to answer that is follow the color like follow the color of the row you're on, and that will tell you when it's chains or singles within that row.
Okay, cool. The other question we have is, what does the 25 plus 3 at the bottom in parentheses mean?
Okay, so the stitch pattern is a 25 stitch pattern, but there's 3 stitches for the outside edges. So it's 3 extra stitches for those outside edges. So the start of it said you had to chain, was it chain 104? Is that what it was? Yeah, chain 104. And then when you single crochet in the second chain from hook and then all the way across, you'll end up with 103 stitches. Okay. So let's take off 3. So we'll take 103 minus 3. So we know those 3 are just like, they're just a standalone set of 3 that is in this pattern. And then we're left with 100 stitches. So if we take that 100 and divide it by 25, knowing that the stitch multiple is 25, we know we're going to have a total of 4 stitch multiples, right? Because 25 plus 25 is 50. 50 plus 25 is 75. 75 plus 25 is 100. So we're going to have 4 stitch multiples in the pattern. So that's 100 stitches. And then we have 3 like standalone stitches. Like you don't repeat those 3 stitches for the stitch multiple. It's only the 25. Those 3 stitches are standalone, and it's to create that little edge on the outside of the diamonds. Does that help? Hopefully it does.
Yeah.
Cool.
We also have one last question here from Kathleen saying, I'm left-handed. How would I start this using the chart? Would I start from the left to the right, or would it make a difference?
Okay, so I have left-handed friends who they tell me that they'll still read a chart from right to left. Then I have other left-handed friends that said they'll switch it up on them and go left to right. Conveniently, this is very symmetrical, this particular pattern. So I think whether you started from right to left or left to right, you would be all right. I think you'd be all right. That is such a vague answer. It's like, some people do this, some people go this way, some people go this way, some people go both ways, right? It's like this particular pattern is symmetrical. You should be okay starting from either end.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'll just take a
quick look. Those are great questions, by the way. Those are great questions.
Susan also says Word has a feature where you can flip the pattern for lefties. That's kind of cool. I didn't know that.
That's cool. I didn't know that. I know that when I film videos on YouTube, I do a flip version. So that way it shows my hands as if it was in my left hand so that it can show them how to do it. Another thing I want to point out about the stitch multiple down here is, let's say you guys like this, but you're like, dude, I don't want to do this over a whole blanket. I just want to make a scarf. Like you could chain 25 plus and then have the 3 stitches. So 25, 26, 27, 28 plus 1, remember, because you have to have that the chain to turn. So you could, what does that make? Give us 29. Math is not my forte. So it gives us 29. So you could chain 29. And essentially, if you took this particular piece here, let's see, this would be 1, 2, 3. And then I think you probably end over here somewhere. You could count across and figure out where your 29 stitches are and just create a scarf just with the stitch multiple. If that helps. Like that's where a lot of people will make alterations to patterns. Like maybe you want it bigger, maybe you want it smaller. You can use that stitch multiple to do that. Or maybe you make a really beautiful shawl with just following this chart. Like just the two repeats wide. Just follow this chart and make a really beautiful, like this would make a beautiful shawl or wrap or pocket shawl like everybody is making right now. Like do the single crochets at the bottom, maybe a little bit longer. Oh, here, I'm going to design on the fly with you guys. You ready? Okay, here, I'm going to do this like this. So do the single crochets at the bottom of the blanket longer. Like maybe instead of 10, you do 25. And you just make them flat and then you jump into the chart. So then you could do, make it until it's like the piece itself, make it 60 or 70 inches. And then do another series of the single crochets on the other side to match. Okay. Then do like a patch of just 1 repeat and slap that on where the bed of single crochets are to make a pocket. And you have yourself a really beautiful pocket shawl that it's all the beautiful macrame bits, but then you just have like, yeah, the pocket's going to have holes in it, but you know what? It's supposed to be decorative. It's supposed to be pretty, people. So you just make something pretty, but that's how you can take something like this that's really unique And because it gave you the stitch multiple, and you have a chart that's a great representation, you don't have to rely on words to figure out, okay, where would I stop if I wanted to make it this big? Like you can see exactly from the chart how to do it. You know what I mean? So there you go. If somebody makes that, make sure you tag me. All right. I'd love to see it.
Yes, that would be. What a great idea.
I know, right?
Yeah. Susan also suggested making it as a wall hanging, which would be really beautiful too.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? Like, so this piece was made out of a bulky yarn, but you could totally make this in a much more delicate yarn. Like you could do something very intricate. Like you could use even the croquettes. I mean, you're talking about drastic there, right? Like that's like a fine weight yarn, like it's string. And then this is like really thick, bulky yarn, but you could do something really unique and make something fun there. Or you could use the croquettes and make yourself a headband. There you go, y'all. Yep, I see you, Nada. I see you. She's like, yep. See, I mean, there's just so many options. And the hard part there is if I said that to you guys and you're just looking at all those words, you'd be like, yeah, but how, Marley? How? How do I know? Where do I end on what row to know that that's the end of what my repeat is? Well, when you have the chart, you don't have to ask that because it shows you specifically where everything is, okay? So as I'm looking at the chart, one thing I did want to mention, so these treble crochets here, those are the stitches that I told you kind of look like baubles over here in the piece where it looks like they kind of bulge out. It's such a cool thing. Can I just tell you, as a designer, like I'm geeking out on that. Like the designer that thought that up, I'm like, that is so simple and so unique. And that is so hard to do as designers because you try and make things, it's like, oh, that's so easy. Everybody else is going to do that. You know, like it's just one of those things. And so actually designing simple is very difficult. So the fact that the designer did that and came up with this great idea for this beautiful textural variation of a pretty common stitch. You'll believe it or not, now that you guys see this stitch pattern, you're going to be like, you're going to notice it in other places in the world. You'll be like, oh, I know what that is. Like I have a shawl pattern called the Shelly Stole that uses this stitch pattern. I just don't have those treble crochets in it. And I'm like, oh, well, that is super cool. Like it's just neat. But that's the one thing I think that makes this particular pattern so great is you can see, Penny, no, please. I'm sorry, you guys. Come here, come on, go. Hey, Kaden. My kids went upstairs and left me. Isn't that awesome? I'm so sorry. We have contractors at our house, so they're coming in and out. So that's the problem. So I apologize. Okay. So those treble crochets add so much texture to a stitch pattern that's really unique. And just like I said, it's a bed of single crochets, but really cool. Okay. So somebody said they wanted me to go up to the notes section. Oh, we're going to get over here to this edge diagram because that's cool too. Okay. The notes. Where are the notes? Right here. Blanket is worked lengthwise from side to side. So that's pretty self-explanatory, right? I'm guessing you guys understand what that means. Push the treble stitch to the right side of work to form the baubles. So that's just as you create that treble stitch, it might want to pop to the opposite side just because it's the nature of what happens. And so you just kind of pop those out, pluck them out to the right side of the work to make sure you get that bauble texture, which coincidentally, this is something that Lily and I talked about before we went live, is both sides of this blanket look beautiful. Like that's one of the pretty things about this is one side you kind of have that bobbly texture, but the other side is equally as beautiful. So it really is reversible. It's a beautiful blanket. And I will show you that in just a minute. I'll show you both sides. Work the stitches in chain spaces close to the edge of the space to ensure stitches remain grouped with stitches next to them. Awesome. So now we know we don't have to fight and put stitches into the chains. Now, could you put stitches into the chains? Yes, you could, but you don't have to. Diamond pattern is worked over a multiple of 25 stitches plus 3. We already went over that. And then right here, this is where we would start with the chain 104. And then essentially these are 10 rows of single crochets.
Now, I know we had someone ask earlier, were there 3 or 4 diamonds across? And I think it's 3 diamonds across. Is that right with the repeat?
No, it's 4.
Oh,
yeah. Because the multiple is 25 and it's 103 stitches. So it's 4 diamonds across.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I can open it up. Let me stop the screen share and I'll open it up and show you guys. I'll stand up and show you. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as far as down, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3 down. Is that the question she had? So it's 3 down, 4 across.
Nice.
Okay. Now I got to fold it up so that I can show it again. Oh, you know what? This is a good time for me to show you the right side and the wrong side. So let me move my mic. Can you see the right side there? Can you see the texture?
Yeah, you
I'll
can
show
really
you
see the
underneath.
bubbles.
You can see the bobbles. Like,
yeah.
It's really cool. But then even on the opposite side, like it's just beautiful. It kind of looks like a lattice look. Can you see? I think it's really cool. I like blankets when you can use the quote unquote right side or wrong side and it's still beautiful. I like that. All right, I'll fold it up so I can show you under the camera here. How are we feeling? Any more questions so far?
We have a question here from Benita about the bobbles.
Yes.
Are they the same as a popcorn stitch? But it's not. It's a treble crochet.
Yeah, it's just a treble crochet. That's the beauty of it, guys. I mean, this is so simple. You don't even have to complicate it. Don't complicate it. It's just a treble crochet. So crazy to me that it's just a treble crochet. Because even you guys, even when I looked at this thing, you want to go ahead and go to my hands, Felicia? When I looked at this, even just when I got it in the mail, I was like, oh, look at those bobbles. And then I started looking, I'm like, oh, are they chains? Like, what are those? And I looked at the pattern, I'm like, how cool is that? They're just treble crochets. And they pop out where you can just put your finger right through them. Like, they just give this really great texture. I mean, it's just fascinating. I love the designer that designed this. Like, everything that she has designed that I've ever taught, I'm just like, oh, she is just so good. She is so good, you guys. It's just fantastic. She does such a great job. I mean, look at that. So right there, here, when I was talking about popping the trebles to the opposite side. So like right here, there's a treble and you just pop it through and it creates that texture. Can you see the diamond here? Yeah. I mean, very easy. You see all these chains? And then when she was talking about in the notes about putting the single crochets into the chains and kind of make them close together, see how the single crochets are close to like create this mini diamond inside the big diamond? Can everybody see that? I just want to make sure you're able to understand. So it's like that single crochet that's on those chains. It's not like over here in the middle. It's close to this grouping so that it creates that really beautiful stitch. Yeah. All right. I'm looking for your nods so that way I can see. It's just, I mean, okay. So show of hands, knowing that you've seen this now, you've seen the chart and I've showed you that it's like really basic stitches. Does this seem like something you could absolutely do? Yeah. You could totally do this. You could totally do this. Susan has raising her hand. She has a question. Okay, I see a question. Shirley says, if I were to try for a baby blanket with thread, would it be good or something like this? All right, so I'm going to give you my own personal opinion on this. Because of the holes and the nature where little babies' fingers and thumbs could get caught in these holes, I wouldn't make this as a baby blanket. Because you could cut off circulation on accident. Back in the day, I would have never even thought about that. I probably would have made this for my own kid until I knew somebody who had that happen to their child. And I was like, oh, that's just terrible. It's just something you don't think about, right? So I would not make this as a baby blanket just because little tiny fingers could get caught in there and you just never know. And if it cuts off circulation, they could actually like lose a finger. So I would not make this for a baby. Just, I mean, you use your own discretion, but I would not. Just personal opinion. All right, let's see here. I hadn't thought about that. I know, Shirley, it's one of those things like you don't think about that stuff. Like it's crazy. It's little things like that. Like we all get wiser, right? As we get older. Absolutely. Okay. Any other questions? I'm looking in the chat also. Lillian, do you see any?
Yeah, we did have a question earlier from Benita asking if you would be able to demonstrate the 3 stitches, just if there was time before the end of the class.
The double, treble, and the chains?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I can do that. Before I do that, I do want to talk about the edging real quick. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to do a share screen also so we can look at the edging, because there is a chart for the edging also. So first things first, whenever I add edging to anything, you guys, I will grab stitch markers, and you guys know the ones like these stitch markers, like the ones that are removable stitch markers, like they are your friends. Make sure you have some. I will always essentially block off sections of whatever my blanket is, so that way I know that whatever my stitch pattern is for my edging, I have to put an equal number in this section and this section and this section. Does that make sense? It really helps you make sure that everything is nice and evenly spaced. Having said that, if you need to fudge a little bit in the edging as far as the first round to get things evened up, nobody will ever know. So you can always use that as a little bit of give. So the edging here, let me see, I want to make sure I'm with the right part. Yep. Okay, so the edging is worked over a multiple of 4 stitches plus 1. So that lets you know that it's a multiple of 4 stitches, but you're going to have that one extra stitch. Okay, so the same idea with the multiple of the diamonds themselves. Top edging, first row, it says join yarn with a slip stitch at the top right hand corner of blanket and work across the first short edge, which is the top of the blanket. Chain 1, work 89 single crochets evenly across the top edge of the blanket and turn. So you're going to be working 89 stitches across the top. So once you do that, you'll turn and you'll work back. So you're working in rows. Are you doing this on every row? Yeah, so it's just the top edge and the bottom edge. Where is, I want to look here. Sorry. The first short edge, single crochet, chain 6, blah, 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 skip. I guess I'm confused because, so on the blanket, Lilia, maybe you can help me here. On the blanket, the top edge is blank. It's the side edge that has the edging. You see what I mean? Because the top, like this is the top of the blanket, but the edging is on the sides. It does say short edge, which is this would be shorter because it's
the short edge.
heights.
Yeah.
So it does say short edge. That might be something that we have to look into, because the short edge, it is the short edge. So working across the short edge, you guys, you would work back and forth so that way you get this look. Let's come down here. Can you see how easy this is? So here's our first one. We single crocheted across to get ourselves some stitches. That gives us our base so that we can work into them. Then on row 2, we're going to chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So even though these chains come up and then they curve over, that's so that you can get the visual of what's happening. Because on the third row, you're going to put that single crochet, most likely right there into that third chain from hook, would be my guess, without looking at the actual pattern. Yep, 1 single crochet in the third chain from the beginning chain. See, it's going to go right there just to give you that crisp edge. But you're going to chain 6. You'll skip 1, 2, 3, 4, and in the 5th one, you'll do a double, skip 3, do a double. You have chain 3s between. So chain 3, skip 3, double, if you're creating your next row of fabric. But then this up here, this is the final edge. So you chain 3 and then you do those 3 double crochets all into the top of that double crochet. Can you all see how those 3 doubles, it's almost like they're an arrow all pointing to where they're supposed to go. You see what I mean here? So that is where I find charts the most helpful, is when you see things like this, that they're all pointing to where they need to go. Now, here's the other thing I'm going to tell you guys right now. You see how each one of these double crochets has their own top hat? Okay. That lets you know that each one of those double crochets is completed as a full double crochet. It's not a cluster. It's not a bobble. It's not a popcorn. It's not anything like that. That is a full double crochet completed into that double. That's a second full double crochet completed into that double, so on and so forth. Okay. If all of these had one top hat, that would let you know that it was like a cluster or like a bunch of stitches put together, because you would have one final yarn over and draw through, which would give you one final top of the stitch. So think of the top of the stitch. That's like your top hat. That's what I think of it as. So each of these is going to have their own top of the stitch. So they're all their own individual stitches. And then we can see right here, we have a single into this double, and then we're going to chain 3, and then we're going to put 3 doubles into that double. So all of this goes into that one double crochet. All right. So if you go to my hands, let me stop the share screen. If you go to my hands, and we're looking at the edging here. Okay. So here's our chain 6. Here's our double. Here's our chain 3, right? Chain 3, skip 3, double, chain 3, skip 3, double. And then working back, can you see how there's our single? Here's our chain 3. Here's a double, 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 and it's all into that one double. Can you see that? Can you see how it kind of looks like that sort of, it's kind of like triangle-esque, just like how the chart shows. Now, having said that, then you throw on these tassels if you want, but if you didn't want these tassels, you guys, I'm going to take it off just so you can see. You wouldn't have to have the tassel. You could actually change this up, and instead of a chain 3 here, you could do a chain 2 to tighten that up a little bit if you didn't want to add tassels and get a much more crisp sort of pointed look. Okay, you could even do a chain 2 and then do like a picot and then go into there. Like you could do something where it would end up like that. So there's lots of options. So for those of you that are like, I hate tassels, I don't want tassels, I can't do this because it has tassels. You don't have to do tassels, I promise. But if you want to, it's available for you to do that. How are you doing so far? Any questions?
I think we're doing good.
Put that on backwards. I do that every time. Anybody else do that? They do tassels and they put it on backwards every single time. It never fails. Never fails. All right. I always have to remember to go the other way. Doing good. Okay. So you want to see the stitches. Let me see here. All right. So how much time do I have? I have about 8 minutes. Let me see what I can show you in 8 minutes. Let me grab some yarn. I'm just grabbing, I don't have blanket yarn right here because I wasn't planning on doing this, but I have some swirl cakes. And let me grab a hook. Everybody good so far? Yes, yes.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yes.
I missed a question earlier from Liz. She said, could you speak to row 10 and the symbol on the left, which looks like it's a chain 2 to me?
About the row 10?
Yeah, row 10.
Okay. Oh, yes, that's a chain. Yeah, let me, that's a very good question. So let me share screen before I do anything, because that's a very good question.
Sorry, thank you. I missed that one earlier.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so on row 10, right here, those are chains. So those are the beginning chains. So how many of you have ever started a project and you're like, do my chains count as a stitch? Do they not count as a stitch? What's going on? Well, this right here, this is the beginning chains of this row, but you see how those chains are essentially on top of those 2 singles, okay? Whereas on rows 8, 6, 4, 2, see how the chains are out here on the outside? When the chains are on the outside of the work, that gives you a clue that those chains do not count as a stitch because they're just kind of randomly out there on the outside, just symbolizing that you've turned your work and these are your outside chains. But when your chains show that they're on top of the stitch from the row below and they're right below the stitch above, like it's right there, that lets you know that those chains are going to count as stitches. So they're resting there. They're representing that stitch that would be there. So those 2 chains there, it looks like they are representing a double crochet. So it's not 3 chains for this particular one. I'm saying it's a double crochet. And the reason I'm making that educated guess is because it's supposed to mirror what's down here, which is a double crochet. So you would start off with the chain 2 and you would skip this first single and you would do your first double crochet in that second single because your chain 2 would actually count as a stitch. So on row 11, when you come back, you would actually want to work that single right there into that chain 2. Does that make sense? All right. That's what you could do. Now, I mean, I have on my YouTube channel, if all of you are pretty experienced crocheters, I'm assuming, I do what I call a stack double crochet is what I call it. You could totally do a stack double crochet right there. If you don't like the look of just having some chains out there, and it would give the look of a double crochet. But yeah, that's how that works. Does that make sense? And that's a great question because that happens a lot. And that's another advantage of looking at a chart is knowing whether a stitch or chains actually count as a stitch or not. That's a great question. All right, so I'm going to stop that. I'm going to come back over here. I got to chain a couple. What stitches do you guys need to know? Like all of the different stitches, just how to make them, just in general? I'm guessing.
I'm going to just say for everyone, yes, please.
Okay. So this is a single crochet, and I'm going to work some single crochets into the chain itself. And if you follow me along on any of my other platforms, you know that I really don't pay much attention to where I'm putting my single crochet, as far as I don't just do it in the back loop. I don't just do it in what I call the butt of the stitch. I kind of do it in the back loop and the butt of the stitch. So I leave that bottom loop exposed. I like it that way, and I find it easy for me to work my edging and whatnot into it. So I tend to work into my chains in this manner, no matter what, unless I'm doing like something with a slip stitch. I'm just going to demonstrate the different stitches. Okay. So this would be my example of a chain one, which is not going to count as a stitch. So on the chart, it would be represented as outside of the chart, and I would turn. And so because that's not represented, I would go ahead and single crochet into that first single crochet. Okay. Let's just, for teaching purposes, let's assume this was our row 10 and we were going to chain 2. I would not work into that first stitch. I would put a double. So I'd yarn over my hook because it has 1 slash on the symbol, right? And I'd put my double starting in my second single crochet. And I would know that this here counts as a double. So on my last stitch on the next row, I would put it into my actual chains. This is the one spot where I don't work into a space when it's turning chains. I actually work into the chains because I think it makes things more solidified. So let's do that double crochet again so you know how to do it. I yarn over my hook, go into the stitch, yarn over my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over my hook, draw through 2, yarn over my hook, draw through 2. If I wanted to do a treble crochet, which is represented by 2 slashes, yarn over my hook twice to start, go into the stitch, yarn over my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over my hook, draw through 2, yarn over my hook, draw through 2, yarn over my hook, draw through 2. Now this is not in your pattern, but we talked about it. What if we had to have 5 slashes? So you would yarn over your hook 5 times to start, insert, yarn over, pull up. I don't even know what this stitch would be called, but I know how to complete it, right? You just continue to yarn over, draw through 2. And it would be a very tall stitch, but I could do it, and I could recognize it on a symbol if I wanted to. Let's go back to a double. So I'd yarn over, come in here. Look at that. There's a bauble for you, huh? But I mean, that's it. Other than that, then you have your chains. So you would chain, you could have your chain 3, say you skip 2 and you put a single down here. I'm just going willy-nilly just to show you stitches, but see what I mean? Does that answer her question as far as what stitches? How to do a stacked single crochet. I actually call it, so I call it a stacked double crochet. Let me show you how to do it. Let me undo this and I'll show you how I do my stacked double crochet. Guys, I just came up with it one day. I was really unhappy with the look of starting with chains and then working a double. I didn't like how it looked. So this is what I came up with. It's probably better called a stacked single crochet because that's what you're essentially doing. But because I wanted people to understand that you were doing a double crochet, I called it a stacked double crochet. So what I do for a stacked double crochet is I don't chain at the end. I turn my work. So I have this loop on my hook. I'll go into this first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then it looks like I'm going to complete a single crochet, right? Okay, so I complete a single crochet. Now, let me get something here. Can you see this space right there? It's between, that's the loop that was on my hook. That's the loop I pulled up. The space right between those, right there, that's where I'm going to place my hook and create another single crochet. So I essentially, it's like piercing the center of your stitch. I just pierce the center of my stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. So it's like I put 2 single crochets, one on top of the other. And so you get a stitch that looks like that. It's a really nice clean look on the side. And then you could carry on doing your doubles. And I want you to see what it looks like. but it just, see how it looks like a double crochet. It's pretty. I like it. So that's how I do a stacked. And I have a video for that on my YouTube channel if you guys want to check it out more, but you could substitute that for any double crochet that you are starting off on a row. I mean, shoot, if you want to start off with just do one more and you have a treble. Is that helpful? How many of you like that? Yeah, awesome. I love Myrtle's excitement. She's amazing. So yeah, those are your stitches, you guys. All right, so I want you to be honest with me here. You want to go back to my face, Felicia? Did you find this helpful? Because I mean, when I thought about this class and the whole idea of doing tips and tricks, I knew I couldn't get through a full 20 rows of the stitch pattern in the time frame of the class. And I was like, is that really going to help them? Because I'm just going over stitches that you know. I really felt like going over the chart and explaining how you would read a chart and how it's advantageous to you to make alterations, do something different with it, how that can be really helpful. So I decided to spend a lot of time on the chart in class, and I hope that you found it helpful. And then it really does kind of feel like the matrix sort of opens up, right? And I mean, don't be afraid of these things. They're totally there to help you. I know that I love them a lot. Use the color tricks with either the highlighters or colored pencils, or if you are having trouble like reading where you are on what row, use a post-it note to block off the rows above the row you're on, so that way you can see the stitches you're working into below the row you're working. But you could use post-it notes. There's just so many ways to make it advantageous to you. Don't be afraid to make notes. Don't be afraid to add numbers. That's there for you. It's meant to be a pattern for you. And once you can understand the whole idea of symbols, like you just learned, you learned so many symbols, and from here on out, you're going to find some symbols and you're going to be like, ooh, what is that? And you're like, ooh, it's one top hat. Ooh, that means I'm going to do like a partial double, a partial double, a partial double. And I'm going to yarn over and pull through all of them at the top. I know that stitch. And it's just exciting because all of a sudden this whole world is opened up to you because of this little tiny pattern. Like, it's like, who knew? It's just fun. So I really hope you found it helpful a lot. It looks like you guys did. I can see in the chat you guys are saying yes. That makes me really happy. That makes me so happy. Oh, good. So there you have it, y'all. That's the class. It's been an hour. Can you believe it? All right, Lillian, I'll give it back to you, my friend.
Thanks, Mally. Thanks for joining us today I'll start again. Thanks for joining us today for this live community classroom with Michaels. We would love to see your whips, so please share your work with hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels and hashtag Yarnspirations. And just a reminder that you can find more classes at michaels.com, and the recording for today's class, if you'd like to rewatch it, is on michaels.com/classes. It'll be up there tomorrow.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Mally. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. See you online.